finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, so we're back after Thanksgiving. We were not together on Thanksgiving. I think May ate more than me.
I stuffed myself for the first time in a very long time. Must have been all that talk about food. Plus, I was with friends over Thanksgiving because I was alone. It was weird, but I think other people's food sometimes tastes better than when you make it yourself. At least that's what my mom always said. So it was
Maybe it's
delicious.
because the food they make is the food that's better than if you made it yourself.
An irony of all ironies, I ate mac and cheese. You know how I was mocking it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, someone brought mac and cheese, homemade, and even though it wasn't gluten-free, I ate them, and it was so delicious.
No, that's really good. No, I had a very impromptu, quick trip. One of my friends did kind of a pseudo-elopement. So I flew off to Hawaii for a few days to ride Harleys.
You're just trying to rub it in, so we're all jealous.
It's awesome.
We're all
It was
jealous.
spectacular. All right, so today's episode is really interesting. It's longer than usual. We're going to let it just run.
We decided to let it all play through because if you're into it, you're going to love it, and we didn't want to cut it in half. And it's definitely one of these topics that, you know, you have to be interested in physician unions, or even, you know, if you're not medical, at least paying attention to why your doctor, nurse, healthcare provider might want to unionize, which we get into.
Yeah, this was far more engaging than I had anticipated, because normally the conservative side of myself normally just like, you know, unions bad, you know, they're just big business in a different shade. And, you know, we interview Joe Crane, and he just makes some very, very compelling arguments for why physicians should unionize. I don't think physicians unionizing is the solution to American healthcare, but I am absolutely convinced it's part of the solution. I think there's several different solutions, and we're going to do different episodes in what I would like to call this series would be called is called Dog Poo Tennis. And I came up with the analogy of, can you imagine if you had a big park, and in the park there was a tennis court, and you had grown up playing tennis, and, you know, the reason you bought your home where you did is because it was close to this beautiful park, and there's these lovely tennis courts, and you'd go there and you'd play several times a week. Well, then what happens is, what becomes more popular as time goes by is dogs. So people have a tremendous number of dogs. They build a big dog park right next to the tennis courts. And then the people that have the dogs realize that something that dogs do, especially if you've had big dogs like we have, is they produce tremendous amounts of dog poo. And so the owners or the landowners around there decided, guess what? We'll pay all the fees for the tennis courts, but we're going to use the tennis court as the dog poo place. So at first it's like, well, I'm getting a good deal. Now I'm playing tennis for free. But then after a while, you realize that there's just a layer, like a thin veneer of dog poo when you're playing tennis. And
because they're not picking it up like they're supposed to.
Because they're
the
not
nice little baggies.
Right.
What is wrong with people?
Yeah, it started out
great. What kind of world are you imagining?
Right. It started out great. Yeah, exactly. What kind of world am I imagining? It started out great. And then eventually, every time you go to hit the ball, it's like, you know, you get a little bit of dog poo in your face or eyes or whatever. And there comes a point, and this is where I bring it back to healthcare, is, you know, with physician burnout and with, you know, nursing burnout with COVID and all of these kind of, you know, issues, is we blame the practice of medicine as physicians. Okay, I've just burned out on medicine. Medicine's BS. I hate it. And in reality, I think for most people, it's not medicine. It's not the career. It's not that you did, you know, a career that was the same for 30 or 40 years, and then you just did the career enough, and now you move on to the next thing. It's that it looks like tennis, and it feels like tennis, but it's filled with dog poo. And the dog poo and the tennis playing become one thing, and you misattribute the horrible experience to tennis when it's just you need a different court. And And so we're going to talk about, as time goes by in different episodes, different courts that you can practice medicine in, different ways that allow you, we're doing one of the things, which is just an independent practice.
So are you saying that corporate medicine is dog poo tennis?
I am 100% saying that corporate medicine is dog poo tennis.
Well,
yes.
There's always badminton.
That would be dog poo as well. It would just be when you'd pick the birdie up, it would be like enmeshed in like Labrador, deuce.
So is it badminton?
Deuce.
Is it badminton? That's how I say it. Or badminton, as some people say.
Well, if you're
badminton? Is that badminton?
That's just ridiculous.
Anyway,
sorry. So I think sometimes we just need a different court, and that's what we did. We're part of a private practice now, which has its own dog poos, but it's the poo you choose.
Sometimes smells better, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, and you realize that there's you can have more autonomy and et cetera, but there's the cost of doing business. There's the ability, what it takes to start the business and so forth. And we will interview somebody that helps physicians set up private practices, takes insurance, does those kind of credentialing aspects, because that's the price of doing business in that world. There's direct primary care, or there's cash only specialty care. So that's another solution. So so
in this episode with Joe, he will introduce himself, his company, explain how to get in contact with them. But I think it's, if you're at all interested, hang in there, because it's super insightful, in which we talk in the positives and the negatives.
Yes.
And how the union doesn't come in there and solve your problems.
Well, no, if you have a really terrible medical practice,
the union
is not going to solve if your marriage sucks, the union's not going to make your marriage better.
Right. The counselor's not going to fix your marriage. They empower you to help fix that. Yes.
They empower you to help you, because you're your best counselor. Yeah. So this is one of the potential solutions. I think it's an important one, because I think politically physicians need to unite, and because we know that the AMA doesn't do jack crap. So without any further ado, we're going to move on to our wonderful afternoon we spent with Joe Crane.
All right, welcome back this week. As we mentioned earlier, with us today, I'm super excited to finally reconnect with my friend Joe Crane that I met in 2019 when our small little group in urgent care was actually thinking about unionizing as a group of physicians and mid-levels. So without further ado, I'm going to let you, Joe, jump in and tell everybody about yourself, what you do, how you got here. Anyway, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Joe Crane. I'm the National Organizing Director for the Doctors Council, which is the largest attending union in the country. We're an affiliate of SEIU, and we are a nationwide organization. We're in 4 states, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. And well, I'd like to come back to the West Coast at some point. So doctors listening out here, give me a call. We have the ability to come out and organize you coast to coast. So, yeah.
Love it. So why don't you take us back to how you got involved in this? Like, you're not a physician, correct? You're not in medicine, that I know. So why don't you tell everyone how you got involved in physician and medical unions?
Okay, so I've been a union organizer, and that's how I view myself as a union organizer, fancy titles aside. But I've been a union organizer for about 18 years, and I've organized a couple thousand workers throughout the years. And about 2015, I was organizing healthcare workers and successfully organized them. Campaign went great. Everything went along. I was taking some time off. I was having my first child. And so, took some time off. I did the dad thing, wanted to get back to work at a certain point because, want to get out there. And there was a job posting for a physicians union. I'd never honestly thought about a physicians union existing before. My perception was from the outside looking in. I always assumed, physicians had it easy. Like you were at the top of the food chain. When you said something, people jumped, everyone listened, and, you had your own private parking space. And yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm
laughing. So
next to the dumpster.
Next to the dumpster.
Yeah, no, I mean,
That's now on fire.
I mean, that's kind of been how my eyes were opened. You know, when I took the job, you know, I was kind of like, okay, let's see what this is. Like, what am I going to be doing? What am I going to be helping? Because, you know, I could be organizing some factory workers out there, you know, who are out on strike. I could be organizing call center workers, some nurses, you know, people out there, you know, doing things and need some help. But in my first week or so talking with the members of the organization, I talked with about 10 of them, sat down, and I was like, tell me why you unionize. And I didn't know what I want. How long was I going to be taking this job? Like, I'm not here just to collect a paycheck. And every single person gave me the right answer. And every single person gave me the same answer, which was kind of weird. But they literally all said, we unionize so we could better advocate for our patients. And at that point, I started, you know, diving deeper. Like, what does that mean? Like, why do you even need a union? What's happening in your world? And the first peeks behind the curtain were terrifying. You know, my perception as a patient, my perception as even someone who'd organized in healthcare, I had no idea what was happening, how you all were being treated, the lack of respect, the demands that were put upon you, the lack of autonomy in a profession where if you don't have your medical judgment, you don't have anything. So like it was a very, very eye-opening experience for me. And I've enjoyed it. And now, you know, I'm out here on the East Coast. I'm with the Doctors Council. It's a great organization. It's, you know, physician led. It's about 60 years old. And, you know, I moved out here recently to continue doing what I initially did. My plan was after those first couple of conversations was we have to give physicians a nationwide voice. We have to give physicians a voice in their workplace. And, you know, out here, I fully believe I'm with the organization that can do it. I have the ability, like I said, to come in and organize in Oregon. I have the ability to organize wherever there are physicians who need help getting their voice back in their profession. But yeah, so sorry, I'm kind of rambling on here. So throw me a ball to hit.
No, that's great. So now having, you know, got to be careful because, you know, May and I worked for a previous organization where we felt like any corporate medical job, I mean, it really is autonomy. And you're right. If as a physician, like you get paid for clinical judgment, period, that's it. And if when that starts to be eroded, especially by people that have never seen a patient, you know, never stayed up all night doing a residency, et cetera, it is toxic beyond comprehension.
Yeah. I mean,
and so, but to just go, hey, you know, let's get a bunch of guys together. Let's call them up. We're going to get our autonomy back. We're going to get a union and everything's going to go great. I mean, like, obviously the gigantic hydra, when you're working for companies, I mean, the last company we worked for is $387 billion a year. And you think if you took every single person in that company that earns them money, because no healthcare organization earns any money unless a physician or a licensed practitioner, nurse practitioner, PA does something. Okay, nurses are ancillary. Administrators are ancillary. They're all very important. They're all great people, but they don't earn you money. The only people that earn you money are people that cut people and write prescriptions. So if you think a $387 billion a year company is going to roll over and go, yeah, sure, you guys, start a union, it'd be great. Yeah, that'll be awesome. Because we want less power. We want less power over how we make money. So tell us a bit of those, you know, some of those challenges, because obviously I would imagine that can be quite, well, we know personally it can be quite
right.
intense.
I know the challenges that we had, but yeah, why don't you tell everybody? Because people are thinking, well, why, you know, they can see, yeah, absolutely, things are getting frustrating where I'm working. Maybe is a union really the answer? Is it something I should do morally? Isn't it, you know, attached with sort of political implications? You know, because you think of organizations that are more political, forming unions, but then it's like, how do we even go about that? So yeah, take us down the path of like, how would even a group start to unionize, or why talk about it, or what's going to happen?
Well, just as Tim said, these organizations do not want you to unionize, and you really hit it on the head there, because when you're talking the ability to leverage change. Because that's one of the things when you unionize, you're coming together and you're trying to force some kind of change. Ideally, it's a positive change, but you have to leverage that. These employers, and this is healthcare aside, there's no employer out there who's like, hey, we want to give you more. It's just
right.
There's a couple. I'm not going to say there's as an absolute statement, but with healthcare, like you said, this is the entire blood source for the organization. And I have seen them fight physicians organizing in ways that I wouldn't expect of a traditional campaign. And there's always the intimidation, the fear that people have of unionizing, as you can well attest to. But what I've seen mostly is physicians being bribed. And when I'm organizing a factory, that bribe could be an appreciation week. We'll give you a pizza party. We'll tell you how great you are. Things along those lines. When I'm talking with physicians, I was organizing a system, and the hospital found out about us, and they removed the 10% withhold based on the Prescreening scores for the physician's salary. So me going out to this location, 2,000 people got a 10% raise. And when you're talking about the level of physician compensation, this is in the $25+ million adjustment. So that was the most expensive flight I've ever taken. And that one still kind of catches me off guard, because that's a huge check to write just on me flying out there and talking to people. So, and then the other side of this is, there's all this fear from the employer. But you have to find people who are willing to stand up and dig in and make a change. Because I wish you can come and say, Joe, I want to join a union. Unions sound great. Where do I sign up? And let me know how it turns out. And that's not how it plays out. I'm not the union. We have our union president is a physician. He's actually been an active member through the years and everything, but he's not your union. At the end of the day, your strength comes from how tightly knit you and your colleagues are holding together. And I've seen this with an employer. And this is the best example I have. 3 different groups of physicians and providers, same employer, 3 different contracts, 3 different levels of people sticking together. One was willing to go on strike because screw it, it's Tuesday. They're like, this is it. You push us any further, they got the best deal. The other group, we had to get them to the point. We actually took physicians out on strike, and they actually got a good deal. The other group was like, so which lawyers are you going to bring in and are going to do this for me? And they got a better deal than they did. Don't get me wrong. But comparing those 3 deals, the strength came from not the employer they were negotiating against, but from the physicians and the APP standing together. So when you're talking about some of the ups and downs, you have to own this process. And as you all probably know, physicians, in the rest of the world where someone's like, let me check my schedule. It's like, okay, am I going to be watching the football game that weekend? I've had a meeting where I was sitting there with some doctors, and one of them was going to Australia, one was coming from Texas, one was in Germany. They were doing conferences. So it's like, there's a lot going on in your world, and but there has to be some kind of buy-in, because if you want to make change, and when we're talking physicians unionizing, we are talking the potential for massive change. If you want to do that, that's a hard fight ahead of you. And you're going against, like you said, these billion-dollar organizations that are heavily vested, especially with you all, to be like, do what we say, which is make us more money, and don't question us. So it's an uphill battle no matter how you look at this.
Well, for sure. But if the biggest disappointment to me during the last 2 years has been the absolute physician cowardice. We've been really outspoken on, we started out with hey, mRNA technology looks really great, blah, blah, blah. And then as, data emerged, I'm like, well, obviously the vaccine's not mitigating spread. That's a huge problem. Things evolve. It's science. And then you talk to patients, because we're independents now. Like, we're not in corporate medicine. And they're like, yeah, well, the doctor told me that he was going to put in the chart that he told me to get the vaccine, but then when he actually told me what he thought, he said no. And I mean, it's story after story after story. And so, the whole fact that organizing doctors is like herding cats, but if you're herding cats that are scaredy cats, that's a whole other level. And when you're highly compensated and you've invested so much of your life in your training, the idea that somebody can take you out potentially, it's hard to grow those leaders. Like, it's weird. Like,
well, and I don't know what you think, Joe, just getting to know physicians in this kind of situation with the unionizing, but we go through school, we're trained to think on our own, be independent. I mean, almost like dentists, similar situation, because most of them are all independents with their own business, but physicians are trained that way, think on your own, be a professional, but yet now the situation that we're in with healthcare the way it is, gone are the days like when Tim's dad was this solo little practice guy, the Marcus Welby Clinic, do whatever. I mean, that's reemerging again, I think, which is a good thing. But for the most part, we're all employees of a big system. It's pretty much impossible not to be. So I don't know what the percentages are. Maybe you do, how many physicians are employed by big corp, but
last I read, it was over 60% now.
So I was going to guess higher, but yeah. So the thing is, now we're like teachers. I mean, we are under the auspices of the education system. We're under the auspices of the healthcare system, and so it's something still in our brain where we feel like we're on our own to negotiate our own contract and stand by ourselves. Yet we are getting, I would say, rolled as a group and afraid to come together. And so what's your thoughts on like what that is, that mentality? I mean, you mentioned, everybody's got different schedules and we're, especially in specialties and people are gone and they try to be independent, but what's it take to get the mindset together, thinking like a group?
So one of the first things to realize, and I always be careful when I'm saying this, but whereas physicians are obviously more educated and everything, you're not that much different than everyone else when you have your life, you have your group that you work with, and you have your day in and your day out. And what I mean by that is like, a factory worker is afraid to pick up the phone. The nurses are afraid to pick up the phone. Like those first phone calls, those first couple interactions are some of the hardest things to do. And the other thing I'd like to point out, like, you all are great at medicine. And that's honestly one of the reasons I'm trying to organize physicians, so you all can focus in on that. But you're going against pros, against keeping you from unionizing. The reason why you reach out to someone like me is to help break down those barriers behind those scenes. And for me, I wish I could say like, I have some like magic, way or anything, but it's just an education process.
Well, right. You have skills and knowledge of not just the system, but how it works.
But doctors get into this all the time, right? Because you were always the smartest guy in the room or the second smartest. And, you were the valedictorian of every school you went to. You think that because you're an expert in whatever specialty you're in, then you're an expert in everything because you're so smart. Well, no, that's why doctors get rolled over by financial advisors, and they get rolled over by in contracts, and they get rolled over by, divorce lawyers because that arrogance is so easy to play, like it really is.
Right.
And so it makes total sense that they'd write a $25 million check to buy 2,000 people off. Like that's a no-brainer. If you're a multi-billion-dollar a year company, like whatever, that's free coffee for 2 years. Who cares?
Right? Yeah, it's adjusting the budget line. I mean, it's right. Not. But on that, the first thing that people really need to realize, physicians really need to realize, is they're not the only ones in this process. I was having a conversation with a sleep specialist. This is actually out in Washington. And he was like, I was so frustrated. I was in the physician's lounge, and he's like, it's only our department that these problems are going on with. But he had it. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And some of his colleagues came in from other specialties, and he was just like ABC, and their jaws dropped, and they're like, it's happening in your department too. So, so part of this is getting over that initial fear of having conversations and then start breaking down those barriers and realizing that, I mean, it really should be obvious, but, everyone is getting the shorter end of the stick now. And then people like me, we will be having those behind the scenes conversations, and we'll be like, so-and-so said, to reach out to you, talk to you, what's going on. And then I'm looking for common ground. I'm looking for things that is going on with ortho and cardio and the hospitalists and, the ED. I'm looking for similar things that we can actually bring a group together. Because there's not like every single group is going to be ready to unionize. I could be the world's best union organizer, but, that cardio department, just got the new wing donated by, some billionaire, and they're pretty happy right now, or whatever
right.
the perception is. But like, if people step up and start owning that process, and they start realizing that they have a lot more in common with their other subspecialties than they didn't realize before, and then whether or not that union can even address those problems. Like I said, this is a long process, and I'm already kind of jumped to put the cart before the horse.
But I think I hear this, and I just, like, my brain starts like whipping around very quickly, and it's just, like in any of these situations, the end user is always the one that gets screwed, right? Like if you look at the dawn of big unions in the United States, with Carnegie and Ford and these gigantic, I mean, Ford literally hired thugs to kill people, like to shoot them dead, so they wouldn't organize. But really, if his employee, but eventually he figured out that even to maintain the free market, he had to pay his employees a reasonable wage so they could afford to buy his cars, right? I mean, hello, everyone benefits.
Right.
And who really gets screwed in this is the patient.
Right. And I think we were having this conversation here, you understand what's going on. Physicians or medical community that's listening to this podcast would understand what's going on. But say for our listeners who aren't in the medical profession, like, let's touch on, why is this a beneficial thing? We kind of did it already, sort of throughout the fact that we are working now for big corporation, and we're kind of like, we have people telling us what to do, directing us how to make medical decisions that some people have been, they have no healthcare education to, being an MA that's finished school, and now they're bossing a physician in the clinic situation to, MBAs. So how does this benefit patients in the end by, physicians unionizing? So
there's a lot of answers to every question. And part of that comes down to, like, what does that group do? Because there's not like, you reach out to the doctor's council and I'm going to have a contract ready to go for your group. So if people reach out to me, say at an urgent care where I organized, and, we got to a contract, and they're like, there's no way to stop the patient flow at the end of the night. And, the fear was always, after 70 patients in a 12-hour period, I'm going to make a mistake. And no one will admit that. You talk to a physician, they're like, I'm doing everything I in my power. It was the best thing ever, because, they're afraid that the lawyer's around the corner with a lawsuit in the hand.
No, I'm old enough now at the point in my life where I go, I'm dangerous. I'm falling asleep. You don't want me working anymore. Sorry, I'm out. I mean, I'll say
actually, Mr. Hospital Administrator, send in your kid.
Yeah.
well, and that those are the stakes. But
right.
like in this previous group, right. And this one really kind of dragged the point home for me. Like we had won the union election, and we had organized around the idea of a closing policy, and end of the day, something to deal with that last wave of never-ending patients. But the day of the celebration, normally it's a happy day, and, we met at a restaurant to celebrate, and the first person was there was obviously distraught. And I'm like, what's going on? What's happening? And patient 53 at the end of the 12-hour day, they missed, and I'm not a physician, so please, bear with me my lack of medical terms, but they missed the puncture wound on the x-ray. And, they're sitting there, they got tears in their eyes, they're like, I looked. I just didn't see it. I was tired. I was exhausted. And good, that one turned out fine. It was caught on a flag and everything like that.
Right.
But they were racked with guilt, because they were like, I didn't help someone because I failed. And I'm like, no, you didn't fail. you were working in an unsafe working environment to maximize profits. But like so when we're talking about like for patient care, like, going home at a reasonable time with a reasonable amount of patients is critical. And the average patient does. I mean, I remember when when I was younger, I got a concussion and I went to the urgent care 5 minutes before it closed. And they were professional. They were amazing. They were great. I had no idea. I thought it was a hospital. I thought there's this never-ending refreshed bodies coming in and taking over.
Right.
But they're human. You're human. You're tired. So like in certain situations, you're talking about things like I said, limiting patients coming into you so you can safely give them care. There's a lot of other different ways, but like that comes down to like what's going on in your group. Like,
right.
What are the policies that are in place that are harming patients?
Right.
Correct.
And I had another doctor reach out to me, and this one is one of the ones that really, keeps me up at the late night when we're negotiating contracts and reminds me how important this is. He called me up and he was like, I'm going to tell you a story, and I wish it was the first and I wish it was the last. And he starts telling about how patient treating them, and he's like, this patient needs an MRI now. Like, not tomorrow, right now. And the non-medical professional who is in charge of that part of the hospital won the argument, won the battle. And our policy is 24 hours and then. And this is the part of the conversation where this physician starts crying. And he's like, my patient is now 20 or 50% paralyzed for the rest of their life. And it was stoppable. It was something I knew from 20 years of practicing medicine, and a policy to protect profit margins harmed somebody. So, because
but that's never happened before in the history of the United States, right?
But it's
like
right,
never,
right.
like not with like railways or airlines,
right? No, this is the thing. All of these things, like when you're talking about physicians unionizing, like COVID kind of shown this like bright light on this, like. You all are, physicians like, well, unions are for coal miners. Well, COVID was the coal mine caving in. It's like, at what point do you be like, crap, the canary's dead? Right. And the boss is like, dig deeper, dig faster, and work a little longer.
Oh.
So, part of this, like I said, you have to really understand what's going on in your area. So how can a union fix it? The question, that answer really comes down to, how could you fix a problem? You and your colleagues fix a problem if you had a say in it, right. And not just an email to the boss, and I shouldn't say the boss, sorry, to the medical director, to the chair or someone like that, but an actual sit down and be like, okay, let's legally negotiate how this plays out.
And so I wanted you to say that because we know the answers of why we as physicians would want a union and the benefits to the patients. But I wanted you to say it from your experience and what you're hearing, because when, depends how we say it, it could come across as not even just whining. It
would come across entirely as whining.
But I want it to be more, I want it to be more like bitching, because we care about our patients. And you're right. So there are times, because we work in urgent care, and that's a perfect scenario, like you talked about, is the closure time. People, it's not an ER. There's not a fresh cycle of bodies that come in at 7 p.m. And the cycle continues with fresh minds. Even though the patients continue to come in, there has to be an end time. And even for, interns and residents who've gotten together and mandated to shorten the hours from, we used to do 36 hours in a row to like going home after 24, because you're dangerous. And so it's the fighting for the closure time to protect the patient.
You're just weak.
Yes, exactly.
That's the narrative. There's something wrong with you for being human.
And so it's like, you just want to get paid and go home, and you don't want to work, and so we try to say it's to protect the patients, because I've had those moments. We've all had those moments where it's like, it's the end of the night. Yeah, they probably don't really need the Z-Pack, but it's just, I'm going to write this go-away prescription so we can get out of here. That's not good medicine. The missing things, because you're in a hurry and you kind of take a quick glance at the x-ray. We're all been guilty of that. And people don't understand that. I mean, and then there's,
But yeah, this makes me
But
think.
but then there's the whole thing of the administrative part, which patients don't understand, where you have these administrative people, some with no medical training, some with they don't understand, that are making these decisions for patients when it's in an urgent situation. It is the physician knows,
but it's
know best, and it's for the best outcome for the patient, even down to simple things that would drive me nuts in the office, like dangerous things in the office. Like, why is this not set up better so I can be more efficient, so I can get better care of the patient? Like, why is this this way? I just need to have a say. I would like to have my MA or nurse do this in this directive, but I can't tell them that, and I can't change anything because admin doesn't like it. And it's not good patient care.
Yeah, but you see, here's the thing that, like, there's good unions and there's not so good unions. There's good medical groups. There's not so good medical groups. I mean, a union, I think the guys that have got it, there's a few that I'd look at and I go, that seems to work really well. And I think of pilots. And pilots are very similar to doctors. They're highly trained. They're highly experienced. They're total professionals. And they have to, even if the wings are tearing off the plane, they have to, they're going to do whatever they can to the end. And it's very similar. But they have an advantage. And their advantage is that it's very clearly defined by the laws of physics how things work. So you have the FAA, which works quite well, but it works well because it's very well defined. Okay. There's no vaccine debate on wind shear. It's like, I'm sorry, you flew when you shouldn't have, you didn't de-ice, the plane lost lift and you killed everybody. I mean, it's pretty black and white.
So far.
So far. Right. Exactly.
Let's let the world catch up to that next year.
Yeah, exactly. Wind shear is racist, but that's another whole problem. So, but it's interesting. So then you get into this, then you look at that and they go, they have really good protections. They can only fly so much. The government kind of backs that up. There's, push and pull. We just saw that with the vaccine mandates, how the union was really powerful in protecting their pilots for what the pilots wanted, which ultimately I think protects the passengers and so forth. But we're not just dealing with administrators. Like, it's really easy to pile on hospital administrators and pile on these massive companies. But these massive companies and massive insurance companies and massive medical groups are working in concert with the government, and primarily the federal government. And so, not like we want to get deep into politics. And I know that there's barriers politically because people see unions as left-wing or whatever. But how are you going to fight as an individual physician against, what I think are idiotic metrics, like doing depression screening on 10-year-olds where there's zero evidence that does anything, or MIPS and MACRA in primary care, unless you push back against the entities that are profiting off of that, which are insurance companies and major medical groups, and then they push back with their lobbyists and say to the federal government, hey, you got to back this off. We can't do primary care anymore because no one's going to do it, which is really where we are right now in the United States. Like, we would have primary care in our clinic right now because we would have gazillions of patients, but the barrier to entry is so high with what you need from a capital perspective and an employee perspective that it's just easier to run an acute care clinic. And if it pays the bills, who cares? And that's ridiculous.
So, there are a couple things you just said, and you'll hear me say this, and anyone who reaches out to me, you'll hear me say this until I drop over. But a union is you. It's you and your colleagues. And you said there are good unions and there are bad unions, and that is absolutely right. And, it's the only counter check to democracy is being active in it. Like that's and that is one of the downsides of unions, because I'm a staffer. Like, I can have all the greatest intentions in the world, and then 10 years later I'm somewhere else, or 5 years later, or I get hit by a bus, or whatever this is. So, like, you have to own that process. And I don't just mean, going to your bargaining, like, at the Doctors Council, and this is one of the actually really amazing things that I found out after I took the job, but our executive board, our leadership is literally, if I organized 10 doctors at a small location, I'm not going to be organizing 10 doctors at a small location, but if I did, they would instantly have a seat on the executive board. It's like a 1-to-10 or 1-to-11 ratio. They get a seat on the voting body of the organization. And then if they have 50 or 11-to-50, they get another seat. And then so forth. And it goes on. So like, it's not, the New York doctors have a say. Like, it's literally democracy sitting there looking at everything and making the decision to hire people like me, making a decision to, from the Doctors Council to be like, let's get into organizing on a nationwide level. So like I said, if you want to stop your union from being a bad union, the first step is being like, I have to be part of that process. Now that's a lot easier said than done, but because everything takes time. And then the other thing, I actually kind of trailing off. What were we talking about? I'm getting all old with all my gray hair. I had a good point.
So obviously.
Go for it. Yeah, I remember. No, this was important. So you were mentioning the pilots unions. And again, that professionalism, and you were talking about, we're joking about, whether or not, the ice on the plane is a thing. These are things that the pilots have actually advocated for through the years, and they have fought for, and, like I said, they're extremely professional. They have extreme pride in their profession, but they have fought tooth and nail for those contracts, and they will enforce them. And one of the things that really strikes me when you're talking about physicians, we're joking. If you're tired, you can't make it, you're depressed, you're broken, you're not a doctor, which is just absolute crap. But like those pilots, they have in their contracts, and again, every contract is different, but one of them is, you could literally be like, hey, I'm in a bad place, I'm depressed, I need to come and seek help. They encourage it. They remove them from flight duties. They allow them, I think like the contract I was looking at was like 6 months, take time off, get treatment, and then get reevaluated. No punishment. No, what's wrong with you? There's, something that, just try a little bit harder and get one more flight in. So like when you're even talking about these extremely professional organizations and you're talking about these safety standards, they weren't given to us, like this is one of the things that unions have been fighting for since day one. And again, I jokingly mentioned your coal miners now because COVID was, especially at the beginning, we didn't know what was happening. Everything was chaotic, and the company's like, all right, here's a bag, get in there and don't die. Yeah. So I mean, like it's a lot of those things when you look at these places with well standard, good standards in place and very reasonable things that, the average person's like, yeah, that makes sense. That tend to be because a union said, no, this is how this is going to be. And, we're going to advocate for our members.
It's either because but I would go even one step back. And I would say because the people that have the power to make the decisions listen to the people that did the job. Like I think of Harley Davidson, right? Harley Davidson was run terribly. I mean, they were run by a bowling ball company, and Willie G. Davidson, bless his soul, I think he was the chairman of the board of directors. He basically launched a corporate coup, and they bought the company. Like the board of directors bought the company, and know what they did? They didn't go, okay, we're going to go boss those lazy bowling ball guys around. They went to the employees and they said, why are we making pieces of crap? Because these bikes are pieces of crap.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you got to do this and you got to do that. And then they re-engineered, they brought out the Revolution engine, which was actually reliable. And they built that company from, what was that, like 1980 until by like 2010, half the motorcycles in the entire United States were Harley Davidsons. Whereas in 1980, half the motorcycles on the road were Hondas. Like they completely altered the market because they listened to the people that actually did the work.
Imagine that.
And it's just like, it's the same thing. You think of aviation. The greatest aviation disaster in the world was caused because somebody was pissed off, tired, impatient, and bumping up against flight rules where they knew that they would have to ground the plane for another day because the plane was grounded by a terrorist attack in bad weather. Yeah. And the most senior pilot in KLM's history at the time failed to get final clearance for takeoff, and he drove his 747 into another 747 and killed 537 people. I mean, it's an amazing tale. It's like even the best screw up.
But yeah, and you really hit it on the head because, again, I keep saying that, but when you're mentioning like listening to the people who are doing the job, and and I've said a union is you and your coworkers, you and your colleagues, and take that mentality and take where you are working and think, how would we fix this? And when you're talking physicians and you're talking the massive amount of leverage that we have, because you're not a replaceable factory worker. And just to be clear, I don't think factory workers are replaceable, but it's there's not 1-800 doctor where I can get 1,000 doctors to come in and do the job. I saw this when we took doctors out on strike up in Washington. We had 94% of the physicians holding the line, and they could not get a single person to come in. All the doctors were like, no, we're busy. You screwed us for the past 11 months with COVID. We're not coming in to help you right now. But I mean, so using that leverage and then looking at what you would have to change is going to be instrumental to this. But also, if you have physicians who are really dedicated to taking this profession back, the sky's the limit here, because you are the blood flow. And again, there's not like how many doctors or just can't get a call back from that headhunter, like that's just not how this world works. So like you can get another job, you can go somewhere, you can open up a practice. Like if you leverage this against these billion-dollar corporations, not for profits.
Right.
But that however you want to phrase that.
I have the bile taste because I just threw up in my mouth.
Right.
Let's not go down that road, guys.
I mean, I am a huge fan of profit. Profit makes the world go round. Profit is great, but don't be a 9 gajillion Sisters of Mary Elephant or whatever from Cheech and Chong and tell me you're not for profit. When you just installed the second helipad, no, not a helipad for patients, a helipad for administrators.
No, I know.
Literally, we have seen that.
Yeah. I actually, I jokingly brought it up, but it's an important conversation because physicians haven't had a voice, and I'm not going to sit here and attack the AMA or anything, which historically
feel free.
We don't mind. We don't mind.
My point though is like physicians don't have a good brand. Like when I go to the hospital when I'm sick, I complain about the doctor's bill when I get it. It's this organization, this not-for-profit, who does all these alleged great things by squeezing the blood out of you all into their system. But they've won that PR message, so you all are the greedy physicians who get paid too much and you work too little. So part of having a union, this is a much bigger thing. There's a couple different things when you're talking union. You're talking about your direct workforce. Your colleagues, where you're working, your collective bargaining agreement that is ideally improving upon that. That's the lowest level of this process. Then you go up, and then you're like, are we making an impact on it, like a system impact? Do the changes that the union won for this group of physicians, did that make improvements for other physicians, even though they weren't unionized? And that's actually part of the goal. We're trying to raise things up. We're trying to make things better. But then on a bigger conversation, you're talking statewide and then nationwide. So building towards that, leveraging for those kind of changes, or that's what we're doing. But it's a fight. But if you can tap into that and start changing that conversation away from, you're greedy, you're lazy, you're overpaid. If people knew just a fraction of the conversations that I've had with physicians over the past couple of years, people would have a very, very different outlook. They do not understand what you are going through, And you all need to have that voice, and you need to start using that voice. And it's not like, woe is me, complaining, feel bad. It's let's use that voice to be like, this is broken. This is how this impacts me, and I'm personally tired of physicians not using me because you all are killing yourselves at record rates. And that is a very real problem. You all are, I've had so many conversations late at night with physicians who are crying because they couldn't help somebody. So again, this isn't like, I want more money so I can buy another yacht. This is like, we need to fix these problems because, well, then we go into the list of things. This is because you're the patient. My son's the patient. My wife's the patient. My dad's a patient. These are the things. And then you need to talk about the toll it's taking on you all. And, that's.
I'm glad you brought that up, because really, the most, from our point of view, the reason for unionizing, I mean, people see it in smaller or different non-medical organizations about protecting their salary, vacation time, et cetera. But I think for physicians, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not usually about the salary as much as the protecting the professional ability to make decisions that protects patients.
Well, it's autonomy.
Protects our professionalism, the autonomy, the medical decision-making process, as well as, all these overlays of a thing. Not so much as, we're paid well. I mean, for the most part, most of us don't complain about our, yes. But
give it a couple of years.
Currently.
No, but
I think for up till now, it's not mostly about, well, we just want more money and more time off. I mean, most of us get pretty much cheap.
Money, I mean, money's still important. I'm going to address it in a second.
Of course it is.
But nobody kills themselves because they're getting 10% less than they
Correct.
Right.
They kill themselves because they're powerless to do what they're impassioned to do. Okay? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is that, and somebody stole your soul and you let them steal it. That's who kills themselves. Right. And if you look at physician suicide, it isn't across the board. It's disproportionately women. In global suicide, who kills themselves, like just in the United States generally, it's 20 to 50-year-old men. Like, we're experts at killing ourselves. Okay, but where it's disproportionate, like from a woman's perspective, is in medicine, and it's not in nursing, it's not in healthcare, it's in being a woman doctor. Increases your risk of suicide by I don't know how many percent. It's truly staggering, because here you take the brightest, most compassionate people
who actually really care, really
care, give a crap, and you tie their hands behind their back, and then you do the most wicked thing you could possibly do. You blame them when there's a problem.
Yeah. So a couple things on that point. First, when I first heard the term moral injury, that kind of really opened my eyes to understand what it was. It's not burnout. You're not tired of being a physician. You're not tired of this thing that you love. You're tired of hurting people. You're tired of, that going home and feeling those pain. So that, and it was Wendy Dean. She's a doctor, I believe, out in Pennsylvania, and she's got a moral injury foundation. If you all haven't, you might want to reach out to her. You guys can be on each other's podcast. She's an amazing doctor. But part of that, framing that conversation as to what this problem is, and that's something that needs to be screamed on the top of a mountain. Like I said, people aren't killing themselves because they didn't get that 10%. They're killing. I had a doctor I was working with. Literally, she went up to her medical director, whoever the person in charge of the ED was, and was like, "I'm suicidal. I can't be here safely today." And the honest to God response was, "We don't have anyone else to cover your shift." And, going back to the pilots, what the hell? And I would love to say that, this person was telling this story laughing. Now they were sobbing, because just even talking about, I literally went up to someone and said, "Help, I need help. I can't help other people." And the response is, "But, we got to bill some people today." And you need to have a voice. Yeah.
That's just that. I mean,
No, like, I'd love to tell you we don't understand this,
but we do.
But we understand this
we've
intimately.
kind of been in similar situations, honestly, and it just boggles your mind. I mean, I think back even to not even when we were interns. Remember, I have really horrible migraines, and we were in a call group of 3. But I had one of the worst migraines up until that point in my life as an intern, and I'm literally now in the ER, and I'm vomiting, and then they've got me in a stretcher, and Tim, I think, was on the same. He's on a different rotation. He's calling my attending that's supervising. He's like, "Well, figure it out. Someone's got to work." And this is from an attending. This is someone in medicine. It's just like, well, you got to find someone to cover her. It's your responsibility.
Well, no,
even though you're in the ER.
Actually, I'm here being trained as an apprentice.
So
you're the piece of dog shit that's getting paid to be here.
I'll never forget that.
So you need to figure it out.
Anyway, so that's a whole other thing. But what about? Go ahead.
Just really quick on that. I mean, the reason why we know it's broken, and we're trying to do something. But this is one of the most important things to me is having a voice. You shouldn't, one, be afraid to walk up and be like, I need help today. That should never be the thing. So when you're talking about a union and you're talking about negotiating wages and negotiating patient ratios and things like that, don't forget those pilots. They negotiated I can't fly today. And they didn't negotiate it because, I didn't want to work today. It was because they know the consequences of what happens. So when you're thinking of the union solution, you're thinking of how can a union help me? The sky's the limit. It's what you all want to fight for. And if you want to give that to empower your voice to talk about moral injury, you want to talk about physician suicide, you want to talk about the fact that you're told to buck up and keep going. That'd be a great thing to use a united voice to even bring attention to.
Right. Because it's always the end user. It's always the patient that gets screwed.
Yeah.
It's the 5-year-old on Nana's lap that dies in the plane crash, wildly prematurely because somebody was hungover and tired and depressed because their wife left them. He shouldn't have been banging all the stewardesses, I guess. But that's another. I digress.
Oh
I digress.
My gosh.
So, they're not. I'm sorry. I was totally incorrect. Flight attendants.
There you go.
Flight attendants.
So why don't you tell us, because I know we went through this back in the past and we had this conversation, as far as trying to get the group together, is there a number of docs that need to get together in the group? And also, there's going to be people that go, well, unions, I have to pay money, right? I have to pay money to be part of it. And how's it going to benefit me? I mean, where we've been talking about should be reason enough how it's going to benefit you. But there's always you would think
the house is on fire. That's why you need a hose.
It's but how much does the water cost to put the fire out?
Right. But if but if it's 80% of your income, then I'll let it burn.
So,
if it was 80%, I wouldn't have a green screen behind me right now.
No kidding.
Okay, so a couple parts of that is the process, the cost, and I also want to talk about strikes. So these are things that I always bring up. So the first thing is literally pick up the phone. Go to the doctorscouncil.org and send us a contact me. Literally reach out. And I'll joke around about this. I'll get a lot of those at Sunday night at 2:00 at night. And I'm like, okay, that person's dreading going back to work the next day. And they've kind of had it. But that's step one. And I know this sounds crazy, but the second step is to answer that email or answer the phone when I call. A lot of the times people don't, because come Monday morning, they're scared again, and they're frustrated. So getting over that hurdle, knowing that when you reach out to me, I'm not telling anybody. I'm not going to be like, May reached out to me. I'm going to call her boss and, make sure she works there. Not ever happening in any lifetime. I will take that to the grave if that's what it comes down to. But reach out and have that conversation. Now, at that conversation, I can tell you I'm paying attention. I'm doing my job at that point. But are there problems that a union can help with? Because a union it's not the cure-all. It's not going to fix everything, especially a first contract. This isn't going to be wow, those great pilot contracts I was telling you about, those are 60 years old. they've been fought and improved upon for a long time. So it's like, I wish we'll be like, here, sign this magic agreement that makes everything better, but that's not how that works. But so during that conversation, like I'm looking for things that, again, a union can do, a union can help with. One of the things that, and I've actually got it a couple times with physicians now, is, can you help me get the CEO fired? And no, I cannot. Not directly, anyways.
You can eliminate them. I hear that's not hard to do if you have access
someone
to
in Jersey?
to the dark web.
You're on the
So
East Coast.
There's ways to do that.
We are the Doctors Council. We are a professional organization of doctors in union. Obviously, all
Right.
the jokes of like the Hoffas aside. Sometimes
No, but it speaks to something. It speaks to how deeply personal this is.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh,
like,
yeah.
like when if my job, if I'm at a job, my boss is kind of goofy, but he does an okay thing, and he's not a guy you're going to hang out with, whatever. Like, you don't care, right? But like when it's like, I want you fired. I want you, like, that is a personal thing, right? I mean, there's incompetence, and it's like, look, I don't care what you do with the guy. He just can't do that job. He's not competent. But when it's like, I want him to suffer. And that is a common theme in a lot of hospital systems, where it's like, and that deeply, that again, it's the moral injury. You are so deeply personally wounded that you want to deeply personally wound back.
Right.
I mean, that's where that comes from.
All right. Hey, there are a lot of podcasts out there. Murder mysteries, breaking news. There's even a podcast about garden gnomes. But instead, you're here learning how to be the best physician you can be. Smart move. Do you know what else is a smart move? Working a locum tenens assignment with Comp Health. Now, I know what you're thinking. You already have a job. But that's the best part. You can work flexible locum assignments on the side for extra income. Or you can work locums full-time too. And to top it all off, locums almost always pays more on average. Just head to financialresidency.com/comphealth and see what locums can do for you financially.
Well, and there's a couple things. I mean, the average worker's name isn't on the website with their degree. Like if you go to a hospital, it's like, hey, Dr. So-and-so went to this school, did this, and is amazing and great. So when they try and chop off your head, it's like, wait, I was great enough for the past 20 years for you to brag about me and then throw me out as soon as you get the chance. But again, I can't legally negotiate over who's the CEO. We can honestly organize like public campaigns and things like that, but I'd have to have 1,000 physicians being like, we want this person gone. I mean, like it's not going to be something that the majority of people are going to rally behind. So we're looking for things that, ideally things that are tied into patient care, tied into improving quality of life, because improving your quality of life improves my literally life expectancy. So, I'm a little
Right.
biased at how this plays out. So,
right.
But like we're looking for things that, and then from there, we're going to start talking to some of the other physicians, and we're going to be like, what's going on? Like, is this similar, or what's similar in your department? What's going on that may not necessarily sound the exact same thing, but if you look at it from a little higher perspective, you realize it can be solved with similar solutions. So we're looking for actual issues that unionization can help with.
So do you do that? Do you reach out then when one person approaches you, or is it up to that person then to kind of talk amongst their colleagues?
A little bit
or
of both.
Okay.
A little bit of both. I mean, honestly, if you reach out to me, May, you know who you work with. You have a better idea than I do. And I don't want to be Joe Crane standing in the bushes, popping out like, hey, are you May? I'm here to talk to you. I saw your face online,
As you're walking into your shift and someone comes out. Yeah, like a black trench coat, right?
I may have a leather jacket and a beanie. So I try and avoid the, popping out of the bushes.
Well,
and that's historically how unions would do things. And I don't like doing it like that. It doesn't work for physicians. So I like to be like, who first, in these very first conversations, who do you trust? Because, this is the risky part. This is the part when that fear of being terminated is actually real, because I can't prove you reached out to me. I can't prove that the employer knew you reached out to me. So this is the scary part. So that first conversation is there someone you could trust? And May's like, well, I know this Tim guy. He's a jerk, but like I somewhat, I kind of trust him and I can talk to him.
But he's amazing in bed.
Oh my gosh. This is our X-rated rating for you, Joe. Anyway.
Right. So moving on.
Wrecked his train of thought.
That's my spiritual gift.
Spiritual gift,
right.
Yes.
So and then so part of that conversation may be like, this Tim guy is great. I definitely trust him, but maybe I can't expect him to keep his mouth shut. Like so we
well
want,
said.
we want.
I love it.
We're looking for. I'm just at that point, just feeling things out. And again, this conversation.
And how long does that process usually go on for?
It can go quick and it can go slow. So, I had a doctor call me up the other day and be like, can you get back to me in January? And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll put you on my calendar for 2 months later. And I will. He was a good guy, a lot of things going on, but that's the conversation too. So if at that first conversation, you're like, I have a couple people in mind and, I bounce some questions off to you, make sure they're good. And then I'm talking to those people later on that day or the next day. This process is really driven by you. I'm technically working right now. What is it? Saturday? Whatever this day this is going to play. So like, I'm obviously okay having a conversation when it's good, when you're comfortable, when you're not at work, when you're not in the hospital, when you're not doing these things. So if say we were talking about unionizing right now and you're like, hey, I can talk to this Tim person and, obviously, say you're not married, but like, and you could literally be like, hey, they're free now. I just text them. Or it could be 2 months later, I finally talk with Tim. So like that process tends to go quicker than the 2 months timeline. It tends to be faster but sorry, go ahead.
And then is there a certain percentage of the employees in the group that need to kind of be on the same page in order to push forward?
So I'm initially looking to 10 to 20% of people who I'm talking to and they're like, this is a good idea. And 100 docs or 1,000 docs, it's still 10%, but the number is obviously slightly larger. So that'll affect the timeline. But once we get to the point where there's like actual interest, there's smoke. There's smoke. There wasn't just someone with an axe to grind. At that point we form what we call an organizing committee. And again, if this is 100 docs, it goes a lot quicker than 1,000. But like organizing committee, and we're like, May, you get to talk to Tim now, and you get to talk to 9 other doctors. And in the perfect world, that's how it works. I just talk to you, you talk to them. But I've had the perfect world work once in a union campaign out of 18 years. So like I'm having a lot of conversations on the side, things like that. Me and my staffers, the other organizers are doing a lot of the conversations, but we're getting to the point from there that we're trying to actually take this to the next real step. And that next real step is getting to a union election. And to get to a union election, and this is the numbers that you're asking about, and this is, people get stuck on this part. I'm going to stress this part. This number I'm about to say, because this is like a sticking point for physicians. They hear this and for whatever reason they run with this. Legally speaking, not the number that I'm looking for. Legally speaking, we need 30% of the physicians in what is considered an appropriate unit to say that they're interested to start the process and file for an election. But, and I cannot stress this enough, you don't win on 30%. You have to have 50% plus one vote yes for a union. Now, you also don't win on 50% plus one because you want to go into a contract from a position of power. You want to go in there as a potential agent of change. So if you go in there with 50% plus one, I guarantee you what the employer will say is, well, we would love to talk about this, but the other 49.9% of people don't want that change, so not really interested. So what we're looking for a couple different reasons is around 70-75% support. And this isn't just like, yeah, let me know when it's done. This is potentially, let me know when I need to show up to bargaining. Let me know when I need to speak to the media. Let me know when I need to do things, because this goes back to owning your union at this point. So again, 30% legally. I'm looking for 75% of people who are saying, yes, I want to have a voice in my workplace. Yes, I want to be able to advocate for my patients without worrying about being targeted by administration. Yes, I'm willing to come to a couple meetings. I'm willing to make sure my voice is being heard for contract negotiations. And if we can get to that point, then the real fun begins. And what I mean by that is, after you get to that election, you start that process, the company gives you a 10% raise. The company, one of my favorite ones recently, Tim showed up, and we had an election, and I was jokingly, I'm like, someone that you really like might show up, and they'll tell you how much they appreciate you. And his name was Tim, not this Tim. Sorry. So this is the bad
What's
Tim.
Going on?
The more professional Tim.
The Tim that sucked in bed.
Yes. I'm gonna just, but yeah. So like they hadn't seen Tim in 2 years, because Tim was moving up the corporate ladder and, was way up that chart. For the union election, Tim had time out of his busy schedule to go to every single location and talk to every single member and be like, let me tell you why the union's bad. They lost that, and Tim was never seen for again. But it was just funny because they were all jokingly, the first name that came to their mind was this Tim guy, this Tim doctor. Again, sorry. But like, but it was like literally, this is the person, the company sat down with someone like me who gets paid a lot more, has less of a soul, and doesn't have a green screen, actually has a window behind him or something, like, but literally they sit down.
No, actually an infinity pool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these people get paid very, very well to try and stop this process from happening. Organizations will spend, $25 million, which is, again, the absolute most extreme I have ever personally heard. But they will hire crisis PR firms. They will hire anti-union law firms. So during all this process, they will bring in the nicest managers that have ever existed. They will go through your files and be like, I see you have a cat. How is your cat? Like they will do everything they can. My last group I organized prior to taking them out on strike, we're like, we want N95 masks. We want to be vaccinated on the priority list. We want simple things. And the company kept saying no. We filed labor and entry charges. The company was literally ruled by the government, you're violating the law, but there's nothing we can do. And after there wasn't a supply crunch, they still didn't do it. So our members were like, you know what? Screw this. We're gonna go on strike. So, and I don't know where I was running with that story. So again, I'm getting old and tired here.
Talking about the process and you getting to that key amount of people, and you've got these people coming in to talk you out of it.
Thank you.
Buy you off.
Right. And what I was gonna
and dissolve the process.
Well, what I was gonna say,
75%. If you have 75%, you're gonna have several leaders.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you have 33%, you got one or two, and all they got to do is cut the head off the snake.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And even
I'm
if
not
they
looking
get
for martyrs.
sued like crazy for wrongful dismissal, it's nothing to them.
We know all about that kind of stuff. That's all I'll say.
I can say with this group that was so angry that they actually went out on strike. This is physicians and NPs and PAs, well-compensated individuals. They honestly gave them a $50 gift card each. They thought which was, it was funny. And this is one of the great things about this membership. They turned around, they pooled that money together, and they bought a bunch of N95s for the support staff. Because they're like, screw you, safety isn't a $50 gift card, but my point being is, sometimes they do 25 million, and sometimes they do, here's your pizza.
Yes. No, we know that. It happens.
No, it really is.
It does.
It really, the thing that, people got to understand this. Like, there's medicine where, you rupture your appendix, you go to the hospital, like I did when I was 38 years old, and, one of the small town surgeons saves your life, and, it has to be there, right? That's critical infrastructure. You have to have it. It's like fire and police. But the other side of this is most of what healthcare is just gigantic business. And that's it. And so when there's a doctor-patient interaction, even if you go in as a patient, you don't have anything that's very serious. You don't know that. Okay. So you're relying on our judgment, whether it's a 5-minute visit or a 55-minute visit, because that's important to you. And there's a knowledge differential that has to be bridged. That is not how the people that run these organizations think. That's not how Giant Pharma thinks. It's not. Like, I have been on boards, I have read letters from companies I've invested in. I did some speaking for a drug company at one point. It is just business. It's just, how do you move money so that a little bit of money comes into the machine, and once it's at the end of the machine, way more money comes out. It's Apple, it's Exxon, name any company, it's the same. This one just has a little cross on it and, Sisters of Profit or whatever. It really is. That's cynical, but it's really mostly true.
It is. It's the number one cause of bankruptcy for patients. So, congratulations, these not-for-profit, nonprofit organizations seeking out help of individuals like yourselves. Yay! By the way, good luck paying that astronomical bill so we can give a bonus to our new CEO. This goes back to the importance of physicians having a voice. And, on a personal level, part of me is always like wondering, again, I'm not a physician. I don't know what it's really like to be a physician. I can work, but I don't do the day in and day out. But like, what would you all do if you had a voice? Like, what would that look like? And I honestly don't know, because it's scary. And I don't mean, we have a lobbying group, but like, what would 10,000 angry doctors in Oregon look like? What changes would you guys want to do? And 10,000 angry doctors in Oregon could change healthcare in the state of Oregon drastically. And, I'm out here in New York now, but I'm Pacific Northwest, I'm from Washington. That's where, if I hear John Diver, take me home country roads, that's right. I know where the roads look like and I know where they lead, but like,
just don't let him take you in his experimental aircraft.
Exactly.
That ends very poorly.
Not a happy road, but again, when I'm talking with people like yourselves, like, I literally have family that have probably gone to a clinic where you all have been, I don't know. Do you want to advocate for more money? You guys can do that. That could be what comes out of this, is physicians, just focus on that. I don't think that's how that would play out. I really don't. And that's why I'm actually doing this. This is why I moved my family across country. I do not think that is it. But if you all decided to use that voice, use that power, like I said, what do you want to change? Longshoremen in this country can shut down commerce.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The only other group that is really like that are you all. You're not shutting down commerce. And I'm not saying shutting down healthcare. I'm saying shutting down the billing part of it.
Yeah. No,
this isn't about harming patients. This is about...
Right. Because people think, doctors here, nurses go on strike, doctors go on strike, who's taking the care of the patients, they suffer, but it doesn't have to, play out like that.
Well, we were basically on strike for almost a year, so, mandated.
There you go.
So, but it's fascinating because, that is, I think that's a really great point to kind of put the dot over the I, or the dot on the exclamation point. If you had the power, what would you do? I mean, I know exactly what I would do. I would... As much as I don't necessarily like the concept of organizing in a union and being political, that's what I would do. Because if you really want to affect fundamental change as far as idiotic regulation, which is super expensive and makes tons of money for insurance companies and massive corporations, you're going to have enough power at the end user agreement, which is between the doctor and the patient, that it pushes the companies and then pushes the government. Because that's the only way it changes. I mean, like, you think of it. Do you want a firemen's union? I think you do. Well, no, it just protects bad firemen. Well, it actually promotes a lot of fire safety because you know what firemen want to do? They want to make chili and work out and not have to put your fire out.
Slide down.
Yeah, they don't
How
want to run
invested-
into a burning building. They want to not run into a burning building. So
Correct.
let's make some rules so your house doesn't burn down, or let's teach the patient to wash their hands,
Yes.
or maybe eat some salad and not the McDonald's.
Right.
Let's give the tools. So
I love it.
Right.
Now,
You know,
a couple things. I tend to ramble. So you had mentioned dues. So I want to, and then we kind of touched on strikes. Now I want to swing back on that. So union dues. So union dues are literally the only way we get any money into our organizations. We are actual nonprofits. Like we aren't, we don't have some billionaire donating a wing to the Doctors Council.
Aw.
Again, I have a fancy green screen behind me.
No, I thought
to
George
show.
Soros donated everything to you guys.
I keep hearing that. I have yet to see any of the checks. like just one time, maybe just, hey,
Maybe,
but no.
maybe your stocking will have a surprise.
Right? Well, no, honestly, the way the unions work, though, and some transparency, honestly, in my opinion, is not a bad thing. But if I go and reimburse some paper clips, we have to keep them for like 7 years. Like, because of all the Hoffa stuff that happened back in the day, we have to do everything. And this goes back to owning your organization, making sure that there's a light being shown. But I'm getting in the weeds. Union dues, though. Union dues literally pay for salary for people like myself. They pay for keeping the lights on at our office. The day in and day out. But outside of that, like the conversation I'm having theoretically with you all, you're my friend, you're literally Facebook friends, so yay. The conversations that I'm having with new organizing doesn't obviously pay for itself. This is something that the vast majority of the conversations aren't going to, end anywhere. They're going to be like, oh crap, this sounds like a lot of work. Let me think about it, So it pays for new organizing. It pays for this hope for other people tomorrow. But once you're a member, it pays for that representation cost. It pays for, the protection. So when your employer wants to bring you in and say, hey, why did you do this? You will have someone sitting there with you, if you want, sitting there representing you, sticking up for you. So it's not you against 3 or 4 administrators. And I literally sat in with a physician, and this one's kind of like this loaded gun because of the unions protect bad employees idea. And I kind of like to expand upon that. But we had a physician that looked into their child's chart, and you don't do that, right? That's a no-no. Everyone knows you don't do that. So in the union world, you can negotiate what is called just cause. And just cause is they have to really boil it down to the simplicity of it, is they have to have a justifiable reason to discipline you and a justifiable reason to terminate you. So what's that mean on a level? Like, that means you can't steal, because everyone knows stealing is wrong. If you're caught on camera walking out with the new laptop and you're like, well, what was, I needed one. The union's going to be like, oh, well, is that May on video? Like, May, the camera's there. And we're going to be like, well, cool. That's the union's done its job because you're guilty. Now, in this situation where this doctor looking into her kid's chart, there was a tuberculosis outbreak. And again, not a physician. I wish they were here to tell this story because they went in all these medical terms. It was great. But she was working the evening shift on like a Friday night and wasn't going to get the results until Monday morning. And she was at the hospital. Her father had been impacted, had tuberculosis. The kids were exposed. She wasn't being a doctor right then. It's late at night. Nothing's happening. She was being a mom. And we're sitting in with the administration. There's like 4 administrators in there, and me and her, and they go on like, can you explain what happened? And she's like, yeah, I looked in the chart. And then she went into all the medical terminology and like, this happened and then this happened. Then I was worried about this, and you could watch their HR person going back to the people who are running the organizations, not knowing medicine, had no clue what the conversation was about.
Of course not.
But at the end of the day, she was like, I knew I shouldn't have looked. but I was a mom scared for her child. And that didn't move the company, by the way. that wasn't like,
Of course not.
They weren't like, oh my gosh, you're human, but what they said, and this was pretty telling. They were like, literally, we would normally fire you, but because you have a union, we are going to put you on a last chance agreement. And this was a 20-year physician who had never, has never been written up for anything. She was a model physician. But again, at 2:00 at night, when there's no patient alarms going off, nothing's happening, she was a scared mom. And they had to take that into account. And they didn't have to take that into account. They had to take into account that knowing that I would have pushed back on that and a neutral third-party arbitrator would have looked through that. And they actually have to weigh those options. Like, what is a reasonable thing that someone would do? Yes, the physician knew they shouldn't have done that. And two, what would a normal human being do when they're scared in the middle of the night when they're thinking about their child?
Well,
but again,
and it's just it's a whole silly in a way because we can get into the weeds of that. It's like, so someone would have called with the results and told them the same thing that's in the chart. I mean, you have access online to the chart, but anyway, that's a whole.
But that's the idiocy of HIPAA.
Yeah.
Like HIPAA is there for stuff where I've known people that have been fired for HIPAA violations because they were honest to God HIPAA violations.
I mean,
like looking into somebody's chart that you're not taking care of to look up a test so you can call your best friend and say, your neighbor that you're
sleeping around,
you were sleeping around doesn't have
gone.
chlamydia, so you should be fine. I mean,
right.
That's bad.
That's and that's an example of the union would be like, oh, well, let me shake your hand and say goodbye. So,
Exactly.
But the difference between a mother and someone who, in that scenario you just described, the arbitrators in the courts have to consider that because of that just cause provision. So, like, when you're talking about a difference in that perception of protecting bad employees, that's what they think. But what happens in reality is you're given a fair shake, and they have to weigh what actually occurred. Now, it doesn't mean that the union always wins, but again, the company wasn't moved by the fact that, her father had tuberculosis from an outbreak at the hospital or that her son was potentially exposed to it at the hospital. It was, you have a union, so we're going to give you a last chance agreement because we know we can't make this stick. So, and again, this was a good physician. She finished her career without any issues and she knew she shouldn't have done it, but this just goes back to that earlier part of the conversation. You're human.
But the thing that's just so idiotic to me is why wouldn't you fight for your employee? Because I get it. We are part of running a business now, and it's immaterial, where somebody is in the pecking order or how much they you pay them. If they're good employees, it's a huge pain in the rear to try to replace them. So you have somebody that's like an ER doctor or an orthopedic surgeon, and if they're actually good and they make a mistake and it's a human mistake and there's like no malicious intent or they're destroying patient care or the whatever, why the hell do you go after these people? Like there seems to be this arrogant power play BS that goes on that just in healthcare that I do not get.
I think, and again, I do not know what's going through the minds of these hospital administrators and things like that. But part of the problem, I think, is you now have people running healthcare who were running businesses previously. And physicians are getting exposed to what everyone else has been exposed to. So the mindset of, well, I'll just bring in somebody else. Now, they haven't actually done that analysis of how many there are and everything along those lines. But you have people with their MBAs who are like, what is the most cost efficient way of running a business? And, they got to keep the lights on. They have a purpose, things like that. But I mean, this is the part of me that I get really upset thinking that there's someone looking at my kid as a profit opportunity. And so there's a disconnect between the people who are running healthcare and then the people like yourselves who are frontline. So,
but there's another thing that happens with that person looking at your kid. And I think that this is critically important is who do you want to fight for your kid? Because what ends up happening, and May and I have seen this intimately, is when people stand up in an organization and it's whack-a-mole and they get whacked, the people that stay in that organization are people that will fight for nothing. That's what they breed. Mm-hmm. So do you want the pediatrician that gets pissed off every once in a while and goes to the CEO's desk and smacks her hand on the table and says, "You son of a bitch, we got to do this. We're not, this is dangerous to patients"? Or do you want the one that just goes along to get along? It's like, and that's what, because I guarantee you these big organizations, they want the clone people that just do what they're told.
So, I have a unique perspective on things. I've talked with, I don't know how many physicians in the past 4 years, like literally thousands. I've had probably about at least 1,000 first conversations, and a lot of people echo similar things. But I've also seen, physicians have been beaten down, which again, from the outside, I would have laughed 4 years ago. I'd been like, "What are you talking about?" Like that's not a thing. But like, you've been beaten down, but even those people who are keeping their head down right now can raise it up. And I would actually challenge you that the difference, I'm actually looking for something different. I'm not looking for the person who's willing to go in there and bang their hand on it. I'm looking for the person who can go get the other physicians to all come in there and say, "We're not going to take this." Because going in there by yourself, like you mentioned earlier, that'll get your head cut off. You go there with the other physicians and they're like, "This stops or else." That's when real change in healthcare will start to happen. And I've seen that. I've seen that personally. I have seen a group that literally sent an email to their petition, letter, whatever, to their employer saying, "We are all quitting tomorrow unless changes happen." And by God, changes happened overnight because they meant it. They were serious, but they didn't go in there and say, "Enough is enough." And like I said, so what I'm trying to do here, and whether or not I can succeed, what I am trying to do is find those people who are willing to go in there and pound their hand down, but I want them to go talk to their other people and be like, "I need you to come with me." Because if we can empower physicians, because not everyone, I've done this union thing a long time. I've organized hair salon workers. I've organized factory workers. I've organized doctors. I've organized nurses, you name it. Like, it always starts with someone saying they have to break away from, "I can take care of this," because there's always someone who can go in there and, roll up their sleeves and I'm not afraid to get hit. But we need people who can bring the other people with them and realize that most people, and we were talking when the recording was off, but I think most people are good. I think we have a lot more in common than we don't. And I think that if people, like I said, those strong personalities realize that those other people are potentially willing and ready to stand up. They just need something to bring them together. And like I said, I personally hope that, a physicians union can do that. And I have a dozen union stories on how it literally has changed my personal life. And I can tell you all though that, and I was working a lifetime ago at a job, like, what is a union? Like, what does it mean? Like, people always ask me that. Again, I have a dozen different examples depending on the conversation, but like, I literally will remember one day I was sick. I have some health issues, that, none of you doctors can figure out. So thank you all for that. Like any fancy neurologist y'all know, Dr. House equivalent, send them my way. But outside of that, I was sick and my employer wanted to get rid of me. And I don't mean this a little bit. They desperately wanted to get rid of me. I had burned through my family medical leave. I had no more time left. I had to work or I would lose my job. And losing your job means you lose your house, you lose your health, you lose your insurance, you lose your life. So this is a thing. So I'm sitting there at work and I cannot physically work. And people always ask me, "What is a union?" For the rest of that day, one of my friends found out I wasn't feeling good. I had people coming up, helping me with my job all day long, coming up, supporting me, being like, "Hey, what can I do to help you, Joe?" So, anytime I think of what a union really is, we have amazing lawyers. It's not that. I like to think we have amazing staffers because I'm on staff, but it's not that. That isn't the agent of change. If you can get people to realize that they're in this fight together, that they're in this struggle together, and support each other, you can build something like that. And again, the change that physicians can bring, I'd like to see that happen. And I moved my family across the country. I've left my beloved Pacific Northwest where I thought I was going to live and die. But I have an opportunity now to empower people who can save my kids, who've saved my sister who's deathly sick, who've saved my dad, like literally when he went into an urgent care and walking by, he was long story short, he didn't take his medicine, his diabetic medicine correctly. And he was walking by, and instead of checking him in and billing him, the physician was like, "What the bleep are you doing here? You need to be in the ED now." They didn't bill them. And I've worked for organizations where the policy is bill, get their registration and then give them treatment. And that physician was like, no, help this human being first. So like I said, if we can empower people like that, and if the public knows that's who you all are, the public knows that you guys actually give a damn, we can make some change in this country. And again, I don't know what that's going to be, and that's not up to me. That's up to you all. But I fully believe that empowering the people that I have met in the last 4 years will lead to nothing but positive change.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's fascinating because I think the desk pounding analogy is brilliant, because there's a tremendous number of desk pounders in healthcare, and that doesn't get much done. I mean, it makes you feel amazing when you do it for like an hour, and then you're super pissed off again. But it's incredibly ineffective. And normally, like, I tend to the more libertarian conservative side to be like, union schmunion, like, no. But the fact is, if we really want to change this, and if we want to deregulate this, if we want to change regulations so it's safer, so it's more effective, if even opening up free market opportunities, it's gonna come one of two ways. And I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. You have to have fundamental political change, which means the people that do the job are going to have to get together and demand it as a unit, or the system is going to have to completely collapse and then rebuild itself. I would much prefer the first option than the second.
As a father of 3 children, I wholeheartedly agree on the first option, because second option, I don't think it's a realistic option with physicians. I think you will continue getting beaten. You will continue jumping in front of viruses. You will continue working in unsafe environments because you genuinely care. So what I hope physicians will do is realize that with all that passion, all that that I really want to help people, do it. Stand up, come together with your fellow physicians and say, enough's enough. So I ramble, and I really, really stress that I'm not trying to avoid questions, but I know somewhere in the line I was talking about dues and I never got to the answer. So my brain does come back around. So I don't want anyone listening to this like, yeah, union organizer dues were brought up and they started talking about his dad, So union dues of our organization, of the Doctors Council, is actually extremely low. The former organization I worked for was 0.95 of gross salary. The Doctors Council is a flat rate. Don't quote me on this. I've only been with this organization since July, but is like $46 every 2 weeks, and it's prorated down. So it's my wife, who's a teacher, paid a lot more in union dues than our organization. So, so basically, it's like $1,100-$1,200 max a year union dues, and you do not pay anything in union dues until you have a collective bargaining agreement that the majority of physicians in your workplace, not in the Doctors Council, in your workforce, your coworkers have voted yes on. And then on top of that, just for people who might be listening, there's basically 2 different groups of union workers. There's private sector You work at, the Providences of the world or the Kaiser type systems of the world, or the public sector where you work for whatever, Multnomah County or something like that. In the Multnomah County part, the public sector, union dues cannot even be a mandatory topic. In the private sector, they can still be a mandatory topic. And there's two things I always tell people that are important. It is just cause. We talked about earlier. You have to know you have a job tomorrow. It doesn't matter how good your job is. Your concern should be, am I a good physician? So that's always the number one thing to me. And this one seems a little self-serving, obviously, but union security in that private sector where you have to pay union dues is extremely important. And again, self-serving because it literally pays my salary. But what I mean by that is going into negotiations after you have a contract. Going into that first contract, if I won by 65%, they know I have 65% support. I never want them to know how much support I have again. I want to be going into negotiations and let them do the work. Let them get out there and talk to people. I don't want them to know at any given day we're at 98, 78, 51. I worked for a nurses organization. They were down to 20% membership. And the contract proposals from the organization were horrendous. They were offensive. They were like, why are we even talking to you? And the organization, they actually made a big push. They got their membership up to 60%. They rolled out a big petition, and the nurses like to go big. I
Yes.
love nurses for that. But they rolled out a massive petition, like, banner size petition with all these nurses. When they hit 60%, they got a contract that day. The company was like, oh crap. They saw where the momentum was leading to. So like when I talk about that union security, again, if it's even possible, one, it's something you'll have to fight over for in a contract, but two, it helps keep the group together. Because if the two of you, you're married, you're great, Tim's paying union dues and May's not, there's friction in your own house. So it's like everyone needs to pick up their share of the weight. Everyone needs to carry it forward. And it takes away that division tool going into every aspect of the union process. So again, I know when I say it sounds self-serving, but I know the difference between an open shop and a non-open shop. So
really, you said, $1,100 a year.
Yeah.
As a physician's, seriously,
people pay that for their Peloton.
So let me market. I can market for you guys. So literally for half my vodka budget.
Stop.
You.
I'm thinking my Peloton and gym fee, and you're thinking vodka. Mm-hmm.
Well, whatever. I mean,
Anyway.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
just to put a really fine point on the financial aspect. This is public information, so it's not a big deal. But we have a advisor. Financial advisor, and he works with doctors exclusively. $2,300 a month was the average Amazon bill.
Yeah, that's what the average household of physicians will spend towards their Amazon credit card. Yeah.
And they don't even sell liquor or drugs.
So,
or
think about protecting yourself, your your interest, your career,
and it's
standing up for you. I mean, it's just
because there's going to be lots of different solutions to the brokenness in healthcare. I mean, this is clearly one.
Right.
We're going to talk about some others. As we do different podcasts on this, but it really, if you're gonna get the dog poo out of the tennis court.
You got to be united. This is basically what this means.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you got to be united, or you got to be entirely fractured and totally independent, which would crush insurance companies.
You're playing handball by yourself. You're not playing tennis anymore.
No, seriously. You have to be so diverse that they have to negotiate a contract with a million different individuals, or you have to be in together.
Right.
So they have to. So what's going to work, right? Because nothing big companies like more than divide and conquer.
No kidding.
Right?
Well, it works great.
This has been awesome. We really covered way more than even hoped to, which has been great. And I think people are going to love it, whether they're medical or not. I mean, to really understand how these things can be helpful, not just about getting doctors more money, right? And And so how do people, I know I'm going to link it in the show notes,
Yeah,
but tell
really
us
quick.
a little bit about,
one more thing.
Yes, go ahead.
One more thing that I have to talk when I'm talking to physicians, the strike.
Ah, yes.
So, no one wants to go on strike. The factory worker doesn't want to go on strike. The longshoreman doesn't want to go on strike. No one wants to go on strike, but physicians more so. The burden of the white coat, the process you went to get there, the do no harm mentality. I get that, but I can tell you, in negotiations, if that is not on the table, you're going to lose. If they know all they have to do is push you to a certain line, you will lose. Because that's all that's what they're going to do. Now, I've talked with so many physicians in the last 4 years. I've talked to people crying about how they felt like they hurt people. I was in a group in a hotel conference room with like 40 doctors and 20 doctors. I don't know. It was late at night, but like they were all sitting around telling me literally horror stories. Like, we need to unionize because of A through Z. And then when it got to the strike conversation, it was hold on. We're physicians. We cannot strike. We cannot do this. We cannot hurt patients. So what I really want to ask physicians to do is look at how you're hurting patients right now. The reasons why people are reaching out to people like myself and being like, this is what they're making us do. This is how they're making us work. In that group of that meeting, I called them out because I had my notes and I'm like, so-and-so, you said this, 20 minutes ago. You said this 15 minutes ago. You said this 10 minutes ago. And you guys gave me examples of patients dying. And now you're saying you won't draw that line in the sand and say enough is enough. And then they were like, oh, crap, they got it. So I get it. And this, don't get me wrong, this isn't closing down an ED. This isn't walking out of an ICU and, leaving a patient or anything like that. That's not how this is. This is a 10-day notice in healthcare. They have to cancel procedures. And I can basically guarantee you if like a natural disaster happened, some kind of tragedy, whatever, we're all throwing down our picket signs and we're going inside and we'll talk about it after the fact. But it's that day-to-day operations. You have to draw a line in the sand and say, this isn't about us. This is about our damn patients.
Yeah.
That you are willing to strike for your patients. And if you're not, you're harming them.
And
that's something I really like to stress.
It's short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Yeah,
it's just like anything we do. Nobody wants to stick a needle in someone to numb them up because it hurts.
Yep.
But in order to cut that abscess open, you got to do it.
Yep.
Well, right. And the other thing is, if from a financial perspective, if you're going to close down ERs, that's the greatest thing that would ever happen to a hospital CEO. That's a cost center. Are you kidding? Like, what hurts them is elective stuff. That's where all the gravy is.
Yep.
Corporately run urgent cares can make tons of money. And, you can close that down for a few days. It's going to be inconvenient, but it's not going to be particularly dangerous. Good Lord, we did it for almost a year over most of the country.
Yep.
It wasn't great. People died.
People died. People are dying. But I really like to talk strike. And the other thing about a strike is I can tell you, I think you should go on strike. Our union president can say, sounds like you guys need to go on strike. But that's all we can do. I can call for a strike vote and then you all vote. And then it's up to you. And the last group, I did, I think we had 80% vote yes and 20% voted no. And then 90 some percent held the line. Because people are like, I don't want to strike. I'd rather accept this contract. But they were like, at the end, they're like, no, we have to support each other or the beatings will continue. And they drew that line in the sand. So, but again, I can't make someone go on strike. I can't force it. This has to be, physicians saying we have tried every other avenue. And again, we will try every other avenue. I guarantee you we'll be in the papers. We'll be on the news. We'll be talking to politicians. We'll be talking to faith-based leaders. We will be doing everything we can to get to that point. That is the nuclear option, but nukes exist. So, if they know that you won't do it, you will do anything you can. You'll put yourself in harm's way to think you're helping a patient. They'll push you that line. And I cannot stress enough. This is not, maybe we'll set up a clinic right up front of the hospital or something. If someone didn't get the memo, so we can make sure we help someone. Like, this is not about harming patients. This is about drawing that line in the sand and saying, these are our patients, and we're going to do everything we can to give them the best care possible.
No, and that's exactly it. It's interesting. I love how you used nukes because, mutually assured destruction worked amazing. That tension when you had rational actors, even though the Soviet Union wasn't super rational, but neither were we at times. That tension was super healthy, and I think we lose that in the political world we're in right now. Tension is really, really good. Like, it's not a bad thing. Like, I got a lot of skydives, and you want a lot of tension on those lines, or you are not flying a parachute.
Exactly.
And so. The airplane needs a right wing and it needs a left wing and it needs, buoyancy from the air. And that's, this has been actually kind of moving in a way because it really reminds us of why we went to medical school in the first place. Obviously it was for cars, but other than that.
I thought it was for yachts. So.
No, we're primary care doctors. We don't.
Right. Okay, from the outside in, I thought primary care doctors were making $1 million, like... Yeah,
well, but they're not doing it in primary care. They're doing it in some side gig.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Real estate.
No, I do hope people, realize this is just about, it's about taking your profession back. It's about taking your patients back. And again, I'm biased. This is, I wouldn't be working this hard unless we're talking serious consequences if change doesn't happen. The next time there's something like the ACA and good, bad, indifferent, whatever, it'd be really nice to have some physicians sitting at the table to talk about it. Like, instead of just insurance companies and politicians and hospital administrators, be like, hey, let's talk about how it is actually, again, someone doing the job actually having a voice in that process. So, we're talking life or death. We're talking life or death of physicians. We're talking, draw a line in the sand. If you have no more hope, there's some damn hope. And you can always, if people want to reach out to us. Again, the moral injury, great actual doctors who can talk, but, they could definitely put you into resources. But, if you want to take your profession back, you want to fight back, you want to, you want to be the doctor again. Let's do this. Let's change the world. So, and on that, I am stepping off of my soapbox. So
that's outstanding.
How do anyone want? I'm bumbling over my words. How does anyone get a hold of you, Joe, that wants to reach out to you?
Well, the first is thedoctorscouncil.org. Working on a website's a little old, but going back to the cheap union dues, we're very, very diligent with our dues money. We make sure we spend it on appropriate measures. But going to there is there's a contact form. I'm hoping you can actually post a link, like my personal work email, and I can even give my personal phone number out, or my work one.
Sure.
I've done a lot of the personal ones through days.
Your work one.
But it's literally Jay Crane at the doctorscouncil.org is my work email that people can email me on. And I cannot stress enough, 24/7, people want to talk about making a change, want to talk about making something better. Me and my organizers are here. The Doctors Council is heavily invested in taking back healthcare. So join us.
Love it. I will link all of that in the show notes for sure. So yes, look for those new emails flying your way in the middle of the night when people are frustrated, not sleeping, or done.
Or drunk.
Yeah.
You said it, not me.
Some people have less adequate coping mechanisms.
True. On that note, thanks again so much for your time. This has been really an enlightening and honestly a positive feeling of that. Yes, there's some hope, I think, and maybe an avenue, like Tim said, for one way to take back medicine. So I appreciate your time, Joe. It's good to actually talk to you again in a great situation this time. So thanks for being here and being on our show. Love it.
So thank you for having me.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.